Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a very special episode of Governance Talk of CPDI. I'm your host Nosheen Khurram, and today we have been joined by a very brilliant scholar and professor, Elizabeth Candy. Elizabeth Candy is a professor of law and social responsibility at Loyola University Maryland. Her research focuses on constitutional law, environmental rights, public interest litigations, and how state translate fundamental rights into protection for their citizens. In this conversation, we are going to explore that how the constitutional guarantee can shape environmental protection, institutional reforms, and citizen empowerment in Pakistan. So let's welcome Ms. Elizabeth. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us and sparing some time to discuss a very important issue. Most of your work is linked between the constitutional rights and lived experience. So in this era, why it's very important that the environmental rights should be part of the constitutions to guarantee the safe environment?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think so many people are responsible for delivering on here in Pakistan. So with last year's constitutional amendment, codifying what had been 20 years of judicial interpretation of what the original Article 9A meant in terms of the right to life, really extending that through case law, through the hard work and bravery of citizens who come before the court to argue their case that, in fact, that constitutional right to life means much more than just being alive. It means having the right to a clean, healthy, safe, and sustainable environment. That took a lot of work on the part of people here to achieve through the courts, and that should be commended. That said, as with anything in a constitutional democracy, the judicial branch is just one of the three legs of governance, right? So the fear being that over time, just as the courts in Shalazia, interpreted Article 9 to extend to the right to a health and safe environment, they could just as easily backtrack from that if they decided to. So it's super important to ensure that that right didn't just exist in case law, but really existed on paper, codified in the Constitution, in plain text. So I think that's important, it's commendable, and it's necessary for Pakistan to really move forward and now take what is on paper, what is in case law, what is clearly the will of the people, but translating that into actual cleaner air, actual health, safe, and sustainable environment is the next challenge. So, the constitutional amendment is necessary. It was a necessary step. It's one that other nations around the world have similarly taken to either put into their constitution or just put into statute, guaranteeing this right for its citizens. It's necessary, but it itself alone is not sufficient in really delivering on what that right means.
Oh, thank you. That's really very important. And we are actually lucky that at least legislators understand the importance of this issue, that it must be the part of the constitution. But things are very fancy on the papers. When you have to translate into the actions, there's always a lot of gap. So in your point of view, what type of institutional reforms, legislative action need to be taken to translate this constitutional amendment into the actions?
So there's not, I think in my opinion, there's not like one single magic bullet that really makes this leap, makes this move from, as you put it, the fancy rights on paper to a real lived experience. There's not just one step, but there's many. And I think one of the things that's important to think about is we talk a lot about whether you're looking at top down or bottom up enforcement of rights. And I don't think it's a binary choice. I think it's both. I think you need both at the executive level, at the high levels of government, within parliament. Like you said, you need those people, those voices who are arguing for this sort of top-down laws, regulations, requirements. We look at 9A, and these are rights for people. These are guarantees. On the other hand, you also need, like with carrot and sticks, you need the sticks. You also need to impel people who would not otherwise, especially in industry, to make the kind of hard choices that really ensure that their quality is better. Otherwise, how are we going to get there? If it was just a question of people wanting cleaner air, every person in Pakistan, I know, just walking out of this hotel, and breathing the air, every person wants that. So we need top down, but then very critically, I think we really need bottom up. And it's interesting, in the panel discussion we just had, a member of the audience raised the point that we spend a lot of time talking about the courts and the parliament, the Attorney General's office, but we also need to think about each of ourselves as citizens as well. And we talked about the role that citizens play in enforcing these laws, in bringing them to court, in going to the parliamentary committees and testifying about what's happening in their community. We also, as individual citizens, as was noted by this audience member, need to make our own changes within our lives that model what it is that we're seeking the government's, support in enforcing at a larger level. So I think you need both. You need top down, you need bottom up, you need resources. You can't, when it gets down to the nitty gritty of how we improve air quality here, if it were just putting the right on paper, that would be easy. It's unfortunately not. It takes science and technology. It takes civil society. It takes funding these opportunities and then enforcing their application in ways that I think citizens are aware of and understand, and also play a role in shaping.
Well, very true. But if we talk about the special case of Pakistan, so fiscal constraint is always there at the state level, at the civil society level. So spaces are shrinking for civil society, because that can be one of the pillar to aware the people.
Right.
So mostly people are not aware. The communities, the local level people are not very much aware. What are the causes of this polluted air? So what type of action can be taken at the state level, and what do you think that the people can do for themselves?
This unfortunately, since you're talking about the local level in Pakistan, I am not an expert on that. However, even looking at my own country, the United States, we have a similar federalism dynamic, and we also have similar debates, I would say, about funding, even though there are vast resources within the United States. Who controls those resources and how they're actually distributed is very contentious, as it is in every country. I think it's important to acknowledge that just as we know that not everyone contributes to the problem of emissions equally, and not everyone experiences the negative effects equally, there's this disparate impact on those who actually bear the least responsibility for those emissions. We also have to recognize that there is a wide range of capacity for individuals to make these changes. So we heard at this conference, we heard from companies that are actually very successful operating on a global stage. They have the resources on their own to invest in solar and wind power for their factories. And that's wonderful. And we need more people to take that sort of public lead in demonstrating how you can do this. We also need to acknowledge that there are subsistence farmers who are not able at this moment, in the absence of any kind of subsidy or direct resources and support, to make those kind of changes that are meaningfully going to change the amount of emissions that come from their work. So at a local level, I do think that it's important really to have those people and those voices most represented, because at the end of the day, the actions at the local level, as it relates to clean air, affect everyone at every level. And as we heard too, the pollution has air pollution has no boundaries, right? It doesn't stop from one state or another, from one district to another, from one province to another. But I think that at the local levels, as with any issue, it takes some creativity, it takes some collaboration, it takes hearing from Attorney General Wan, going even to the global stage and demanding greater resources for countries like Pakistan, who are one of those countries who, again, are the least culpable for these impacts and yet experience them disproportionately. So, yeah, no one single answer I could give you, but I do think recognizing that tension and recognizing that getting the most people involved at the local level and their voices in these parliamentary committees or where else, to really identify specifically what people need, because what someone's going to need in one district, whether it's the resources for the water pumps or the converting from fossil fuel to renewable energy, those are going to look different in different places. And there's no substitute for direct civic participation in those questions.
Very true. Well, when we see the large pictures, when we talk about the global contributions toward the climate change, and so there's always a commitment of large funding for the climate change. That is one of the climate change is a reason as well, and Pakistan is one of the most impacted countries. So at international levels, many of the nations who are contributing in carbon emission very much. They pledge a lot of amounts there. But when they are translating into the local levels, there's a huge gap.
Yes.
So how you see what the global level initiative need to be taken to protect the countries like Pakistan and many other countries who are more affected by the climate change?
I mean, for me personally, it's a hard question right now, given that my own country has taken steps backwards in this past year. With respect to the commitments we had previously made about not only funding the mitigation of climate change and its effects, but in fact, even acknowledging both that it exists and that we are major contributors to it. So that is it is one of the many sort of crisis points at this moment. I know in the US and similarly in Europe, you have of course, traditionally, much of the EU, has also been strong vocal champions of ensuring a sort of redistribution of resources to help those most impacted. But you also have rising political changes in Europe at this moment that are make Europe increasingly isolationist as well. And, again, I think that having conferences like these, bringing more people into communication with each other outside of these narrow silos of, is it a political question? Is it a sustainable finance question? Is it corporate accountability and, having fiduciary duties to ensure that we hold corporations accountable for their actions? Is it a scientific and technical issue? It's all of the above. Again, as we see in places where nations ostensibly hold the most power and resources in this conversation moving backwards, I think it's going to be up to the rest of the world to just start, leaning in and doubling down on that international cooperation, on that exchange of knowledge and resources, on, thinking of, as we heard about, the low cost air sensors, right? Like coming up with these ways that aren't necessarily the high-tech, expensive solutions to problems, but the lower cost and more easily implementable solutions. And that really takes, it takes science, it takes funding for that research, but then it takes in partnership.
Well, thank you. That's very detailed. If we see your experience that you have a lot of studies on the constitutional experiments across the world. So, what do you think? What Pakistan can learn from other countries who has mitigate these air pollution challenges? So, what lesson we can draw from there?
I think, I do think that one of the things that can make the most difference is really, again, strengthening these democratic institutions that both hold governments and corporations accountable for the duties they have under these constitutional provisions. I think that is a basic democracy issue. So I think that doing things in ways that strengthen civic organizations, that change institutions. We didn't talk about it in the panel, but one of the things that's important right now is even just changing at the law level, the technical expertise of judges, of lawyers who are hearing this, who are going to understand those in positions of power at Parliament. The M&A on our panel was talking about, most panels don't have experts, and now for the first time they're having some climate and environmental pollution experts on their panels. I think that is where bridging those gaps can happen, is just ensuring that those who have the levers of power within the society also possess not only the technical information and the sense of urgency about what is happening, that these changes, whether it's air quality, whether it's climate change, whether it's increasing in flooding, these are not happening even as drastic as they are in a linear fashion. They're escalating. And so I think the more people who have power to decide these funding questions, right? If they understand that this is not something you can just kick down the road another year, another 2 years until I'm out of office, those kinds of questions. That's where, again, taking that collaboration, that communication, that interdisciplinary cooperation, I think in those other countries, that's where it is. Again, looking comparatively to my own country on this sort of federalism issue, we are going nowhere at the federal level, but there are really great creative things happening at state levels with respect to air quality, with respect to pollution, with respect to recognizing these rights of young people who are suing their state governments to say, you are depriving us of the longevity of our healthy and safe life.
Sure.
That can happen at the state level in ways that our national level could not at this moment. So again, democratic principles, federalism, and civic participation really are the key.
That's really wonderful. So at the last, what message you want to give to the Pakistani people?
I would like, especially given what I was just mentioning about my own country, for the Pakistani people to know that there are many, many people, not only in the United States, but around the world, who absolutely recognize the challenging situation that Pakistan is in, but also stand by ready to learn from Pakistan about how to make these changes in our own countries. That there is a level of local lived experience and expertise that is coming out of those countries that have, that are experiencing this disproportionately effects of flooding, of the air quality. And so even when we think about transferring the wealth from one country to another to solve these problems, recognizing that it is the expertise of those on the ground here in Pakistan that is actually going to lead the way for people around the world to make those changes in our own country. So I would like to leave the people of Pakistan with a sense of gratitude for the work that you are doing under the hardest circumstances and with fiscal constraints, and just to let them know that we are with you and stand by you.
Thank you so very much, Professor Elizabeth, and for such thoughtful and informed conversation. And I hope our audience really liked today's conversation. And if you think that there are some initiative what we can take, please give your suggestion in our comment section. If you like our program, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. We will come again with any new episode. Till that, Allah Hafiz.